Here's a question from Rick. Protecting yourself against the accelerating devaluation of the US dollar is a primary motive to become an expat. Which countries in Caribbean or Central America are the best places to relocate if asset protection is your primary motive? Well, this is an interesting question. I'd first of all like to make the distinction between living somewhere and protecting your assets. You know, when you move to a particular country, you don't necessarily bring your assets with you. Um, Obviously, if you purchase a home in the new country, then you are moving some of your assets into that country to purchase that asset, but you don't necessarily have to do it that way. You can, for example, live in a particular country and keep your assets, in a either in a different country or just in a way that is hedging against the devaluation of the dollar. So you could keep your assets in currencies that are not U.S. dollar denominated. For example, I've heard of currency investment bonds where you can, for example, you can own a range of different currencies that are paying you interest based on the interest rates in that particular currency, and only use your U.S. dollars when you're buying something in the country where you're living. So in other words, you keep your assets working for you in non-U.S. dollars, but you keep just a small amount of your assets in the country where you live for day-to-day expenses. So but if you believe that the devaluation of the U.S. dollar, depending on how you believe that scenario is really going to play out, personally, I think that you're right that the U.S. dollar probably will devalue, but I'm not convinced that it will devalue against other currencies. In other words, I'm not convinced that it was going to devalue so much against the Mexican peso or against uh, the Uruguayan peso or even the Brazilian real. I think that the U.S. dollar is going to devalue against commodities, including precious metals, which we've already seen in gold and silver, but also agricultural commodities, you know, like sugar and corn and soy and rice and other stuff that people buy, because none of these countries want their currency to increase in value against the US dollar. Everybody seems to want a weak currency so that it'll make their products from their country cheaper. And that's why China keeps their currency low, and that's why the rest of the world tries to keep their currency relatively low in relation to the US dollar. So getting back to the best places to relocate, you can choose to not relocate to a place that uses the US dollar. For example, Panama, Ecuador, El Salvador, they all use US dollars as their legal currency. You could choose a different country, but I don't think those other countries like Costa Rica or the Mexico or Guatemala or what have you would necessarily allow their currencies to appreciate against the US dollar. So I guess my point is that the results of a US dollar devaluation might be felt in all countries, and the way that it will play out is higher prices for everything. Um, so you know I'm not sure if I've answered your question here, but asset protection is your primary motive. I like farmland. I like, if you're looking at asset protection, you want to be in tangible goods, and I don't think it's going to matter so much which currency they're measured in, because I think it's going to matter what tangible things can you produce that people have a value for, and the market will find that value regardless of which currency it is in. So if you're producing rice or corn or tomatoes, you're going to have a market for that commodity. And of course, you can keep your. I do like the idea of holding other currencies to hedge against a U.S. dollar devaluation, but I think that the ultimate hedge is actually in tangible assets and commodities, and real estate can be can play into that picture, as long as it's not real estate that has been overly where the prices have been overly increased due to either speculation or excessive leverage.